brothers and sisters, I want to talk from the theme, you can make a difference. You can make a difference. My brothers and sisters, I was watching the news yesterday, and in spite of the good news that the government shutdown is at least temporarily over, and that this temporary agreement is providing a pathway for what we hope will be a longer, deeper, more lasting compromise, despite the fact that the president has had to cede ground and admit that the border wall, which he promised, the border wall which he tried to ram through the government, which he refused to when his party had control of both the House and the Senate, subject through the appropriate measures of government to get it scrutinized, to get it checked, to get a logistical study done, and those things that are necessary for government bills to be passed into law. He refused to go through the process when he had the power, and now that he does not have the power, tried to hijack the government in order to shoehorn his way to getting the money for the border wall. Has had to cede ground and come to a place of compromise without that money, my brothers and sisters. Despite this bit of good news in what has been a crazy month in the government, the news pundits have been saying centuries later, when historians, when students look at this moment in history, they will talk about this as one of the most challenging moments in history because of the dysfunction of our government, because of the scandals that are enveloping the White House, because the number of people who are working for the president who have been indicted, who are facing jail time, and who knows, before it's over, the president's family and even the president himself may be facing jail time. That not since the administration of Richard Nixon have we seen government that has been so corrupt and so challenging. This is really a tragic moment in American democracy. And it begs the question, how can we turn the corner? How can we turn the page? How can we enter into the next chapter of American life? My brothers and sisters, when I sat and I watched this news coverage and I was listening to people talk about the state of affairs in the nation, it made me feel a little small, a little insignificant, wondering how I, just one person, can hope to have an impact upon such a tragic moment in United States history. Why keep fighting the way that I'm fighting? Why keep doing the things that I'm doing if, despite my best efforts, despite my sincerest prayers, despite the nights that I stay up late working and the mornings that I get up before the sunrise, despite all the things that I'm doing, if this is one of the most challenging, difficult moments in American history, why keep fighting? My brothers and sisters, and I may not be the only person who's asking questions like that in moments like that. Maybe you here in the room, maybe somebody who's watching on Facebook or on YouTube, are wrestling with the same question of wondering, is there any purpose? Is there any effort? Is there any significance in the work that we are doing?
On a less serious topic, but also very important, I had this kind of revelation, also this kind of these challenges, these questions were wrestling with me as I was talking to one of my family members. I was talking to one of my family members who lives in New Orleans and was distraught about the call last week of the New Orleans Saints. Now, I didn't see it. Y'all know I'm boycotting the NFL. Amen. But apparently last week in the game, there was a play where a receiver from the New Orleans Saints was headed for the end zone. The football was on its way. It looked like the football and the receiver were perfectly in line, and it was going to lead to a New Orleans score, which would surely seal for them the victory late in the game. And then the defensive back, I'm told, for the Los Angeles Rams hit the receiver in the open field before the football got to him, knocked him down. And in football terms, that's called pass interference. It's a foul. It's not supposed to happen. When a pass interference penalty is called, you get an automatic first down. You get a whole new set of downs. You get 4 more chances to try to advance the ball, and you get the ball at the spot of the foul, right where the foul happened. It was sure that the penalty would be called. The Saints would have the ball even closer to the end zone. And because of the potency of their offense, they believed they would again score and get a touchdown. But no penalty was called. No flag was thrown. People were upset. The Saints ended up losing the game, and fans from the NFL have tried to sue the NFL and take them to court and say that this game, this lack of a call has been atrocious and ought to be remanded in court. And my cousin called me and he said, "Fam, I'm so mad about the game. I'm going to join you. I'm boycotting the NFL because they're mistreating us down here." It made me wonder, even if joking for a moment, this is my 3rd year, I believe, in the NFL boycott. 3 Super Bowls that I have not seen. 3 years that I haven't watched professional football. And if even the people closest to me will only participate in the boycotting the NFL, just to remind you, because of a man named Colin Kaepernick who took a knee because of people who look like you and look like me, because of the injustice that we continue to face at the hands of police and law enforcement all around the country, and the people who have the ability to raise their voice and to demand change are silent about this. And Colin Kaepernick did not do anything disrespectful, did not do anything to bring disparagement upon himself or his team, but simply while the anthem was playing, first took a seat, and then after talking to a football player whose family had deep military ties, they agreed that it would be more appropriate to take a knee rather than taking a seat. And so he did not tell anybody what he was doing or why he was doing it until he was asked. They asked him, "Why are you taking a knee during the anthem?" And he said, "I'm doing it because of police brutality. And we need to call attention to this." And so Colin Kaepernick placed himself in the great tradition of people who have lifted up their voices to call issue, understanding that he is more than just an athlete, that he is not just here for our entertainment or for the entertainment of others, but he has a duty to educate others about the important issues that are happening in the world. He took a knee, and the NFL said, "You can no longer play for any team in the NFL. This is illegal, my brothers and sisters. It's called collusion." There's currently a lawsuit that's in the works right now, that's being heard about this. But for me, it became an issue of personal conviction. How can I give my time, energy, and effort to a league who tried to ignore the issues of my people and ignore them to the place where when one person decided to use their platform to lift up his voice, they banned him from employment. Mm-hmm. Wow. when teams need a quarterback, when the team that plays down here in this stadium that we pay for, that taxpayers pay for, need a quarterback, one who's been to the Super Bowl, who's had success, can't get a job because he was willing to use his platform to speak out. And I can't even get my cousins to turn off the NFL. It made me wonder, what am I really doing out here? It creates a little angst in me, my brothers and sisters. And if you've ever been in that place where you're wondering, why pray? Why do I read my Bible? Why do I try to follow what God is having me to do? Why do I make sacrifices on behalf of God and God's people? Why do this work when nothing seems to change? Then maybe this message is for you. Because I want to tell you, my brothers and sisters, that you can make a difference. This particular passage of scripture, this in the book of Acts, it comes at an interesting time in the history of the world, my brothers and sisters. We are not too long, just a few short months after the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ, the time that we will soon be celebrating on Easter Sunday when we gather together and sing songs about Jesus rising from the dead. When people will gather to churches, people will come in and celebrate the good news of the resurrection of Jesus Christ. A day that will reverberate all around the world had not yet been put into the world's mindset yet. It was not yet instituted as a holiday on this first Easter Sunday morning. On the very first one, my brothers and sisters, there were just a few people who heard the good news. It began with a group of women who went to the tomb to anoint the body of Jesus, to do the work, the good work that people do in times of bereavement. They went to care for the body. They were doing their good ministry work, my brothers and sisters, and they got to the tomb and they found that the rock was moved from the tomb. They walk into the tomb, my brothers and sisters, and they see nobody there. They come out, and there is an angel out there that asks the question, why do you look for the living amongst the dead? Not completely understanding what is happening, but wrestling with these questions, they go back and they tell the rest of the disciples, Jesus must be risen because his body is no longer there. There was an angel told us that he's not, that he has gotten up. And the disciples, my brothers and sisters, not wanting to believe what they have heard but haven't seen for themselves, get up and go to the tomb to check out the news for themselves. They go and they see nobody there, but they do not see an angel or the presence of Jesus, and so they are confused. So confused, my brothers and sisters, that the Gospel of Luke says two of the disciples decide that they are going to walk home. They're going to walk an entire day's journey to their house because they can no longer deal with the confusion that is going on in the space of their heads, and so they need time to just walk. And so they go on this journey home, and Jesus walks with them, my brothers and sisters, along the path. But in their grief, in their confusion, in their mental haze, they are looking at Jesus and cannot see who Jesus is. The depression, the confusion, the angst that they have is weighing so heavily on them that they cannot see what is literally right in front of their face. And so Jesus has a conversation with them the entire time they are walking. Jesus asks them what is going on, tells them, reminds them of what they already knew, teaches them what the Bible says from the prophets, from Moses all the way through the prophets. Comes, they invite him in, and they do not know it's Jesus until Jesus takes the bread, blesses it, breaks it, and gives it to them. And then they realize, they recognize that Jesus has been right there with them the entire time. the rest of the disciples, they see Jesus. Even doubting Thomas is invited to put his hand in Jesus' hands to know that this is the one who was crucified but now is risen.
Yeah.
Not only the disciples, but all of the followers, hundreds of people gather around as Jesus gives his final remarks before ascending into heaven. And then the day of Pentecost comes, where the Holy Spirit floods the room, and people begin to speak in other languages and languages that they do not know or do not understand. People come and flocking to the church, my brothers and sisters. And right there in this corner of the world, right here in this place of Jerusalem, in this city, my brothers and sisters, that nobody who did not have ethnic claims to would ever want to go, where nobody who did not believe in the spiritual heritage of that city would ever come to. It was not a resort destination. It was nobody. It was not on anybody's vacation itinerary. Right here in the backwoods of the Roman Empire, my brothers and sisters, something begins to happen where people begin to come together and form this institution called the church. It wasn't many people at the beginning, my brothers and sisters, just a few people like we have gathered here. But those few people launched a movement that shook the entire world and that continues to shake the entire world, my brothers and sisters. And what I want you to know is that what was possible for those few people back then is possible for these few people here right now. I want you to know you can make a difference.
Thank you, Lord. Thank you, Lord.
My brothers and sisters, there's a quote that says, "Never doubt the ability of a small, dedicated group to change the world. In fact, it is the only thing that ever has." The world is not changed, my brothers and sisters, by the masses of people joining. But the masses of people only join once a small group of people begin to open doors. If you don't believe me, I know this is still January, but can I start Black History Month a little bit early and remind us of a few moments in our history? My brothers and sisters, on February 1st, 1960, it wasn't the great preachers, it wasn't the Martin Luther Kings or the Ralph Abernathy's, but it was 4 students. 4 college students: Ezell Blair, David Richmond, Joseph McNeil, and Franklin McCain. Not in Atlanta, not in Memphis, Tennessee, not in any of the big cities in the South, but in Greensboro, North Carolina. Students of North Carolina A&T that gathered together at a Woolworth store. Where the lunch counter had seats that were designated for white people only, and where black people, if they wanted to eat at the Woolworths, had to stand and eat. And even though they were refused service, they sat at the counter. They knew that by sitting there, they would not get service. And they knew that by sitting there, they would anger not only the staff, but the crowd of people who would continually gather. But they sat there anyway, my brothers and sisters. They had been planning this for a month. And these 4 students began this sit-in. They were notified by one of the waitresses on this February afternoon that the store manager had requested them to leave. They were notified that the police would be coming to arrest them. But my brothers and sisters, they sat there until the store closed. On the next day, my brothers and sisters, it wasn't 4 people that sat, but it was 23 other men and 4 women that came along with them to protest. And taking turns, they sat there at the counter from the time the store opened until the time the store closed, my brothers and sisters. And it wasn't just the people at North Carolina A&T, but nearby Benton College and even Dudley High School came and sat and participated in the sit-in. 4 days after the sit-in, my brothers and sisters, it went from 4 to 27 to 300 people who showed up to take part in this protest. my brothers and sisters, as tensions mounted in the city, as people got angry and purposely spilled their food and spit upon and said derogatory things about the people, more and more people came till eventually Dr. King came to this group and admitted that he himself had been afraid to engage in a protest this direct and this challenging to the white authority, but he had gained respect for the courage of these students. And the day that we celebrated Dr. Martin Luther King Day, his courage was inspired by these four students who nobody had heard of before in this small town that nobody paid attention to before, my brothers and sisters. I want you to know that if four students from North Carolina A&T can make a difference, that you can make a difference. My brothers and sisters, on the other side of the country, a few years later in 1966, there were two students, one who was in law school, two young men named Bobby Seale and Huey Newton, who were struggling with this issue of police brutality in Oakland, California. And they noticed that every time they would drive down the street, they would see police officers pulling over black people for minor traffic stops, if that. And they would be pulled out of their cars. Often they would be subject to unlawful searches. They would be beaten and harassed by the police and with no accountability for their actions. So being one of them being a student of law, they begin to imagine what would be possible if black people began to organize together and not just believe they had rights, but live out the rights that they have. And so they said, what we need to do is do a physical demonstration. We need to show people what is possible for them. And so they gathered together. They went and they legally purchased firearms. And they rode in the car with the firearms that they had legally purchased, carrying them legally in the car that they drove. They drove by a police officer one day and showed the police officer the guns that they had in the car, and then waved at the police officer as they drove off. The police officer followed them, and they drove legally until they pulled outside of the Black Student Union at a college campus there in Oakland, California. And once they were there, one of the police officers came and reached in the car and tried to grab Huey by the collar. And history says that that Huey grabbed the police officer and slammed him against the top of the car and pushed him outside of the car as Bobby grabbed his gun. His own gun, not the police officer's gun, his own gun. And then the police called for backup, and they were trying to arrest Huey and Bobby for resisting arrest. Bobby and Huey sat in the car until the chief of police came, and when the chief of police came, they explained to them exactly what happened. Had witnesses from the college that could testify to the fact that the police engaged in the first act of hostility against them while they were inside their own vehicle with guns that were legally purchased, and that they refused to submit to an unlawful arrest, my brothers and sisters, and demanded that the police officer be charged. The standoff went on, my brothers and sisters, until the chief of police, realizing that he had no lawful claim, let the young men go. And reached the compromise that we won't press any charges against you if you don't press any charges against us. The black students, seeing what was happening, seeing with their own eyes two black men stand up to the police brutality in Oakland, California, asked, "Who are you? How did you do that? And how can we be down with what you are trying to do?" They said, "Look, we've got a meeting coming up next Thursday at 7 o'clock. Come to the meeting and we will tell you all about it." And that was the beginnings of the Black Panther Party for self-defense. Just two individuals who had an idea that life could be better demonstrated that in front of a few college students, my brothers and sisters. And out of the Black Panther Party not only came the political ingenuity and awareness that launched many political candidates successfully in office, but the fact that we have free breakfast programs in our schools today came from the Black Panther Party. The fact that we pay attention to the fact that children need to eat lunch if they are going to study and do well in school comes from the Black Panther Party, my brothers and sisters. Many of the social service programs that people were concerned about being cut during the government shutdown came from the Black Panther Party, my brothers and sisters. Now, I know history likes to say that they are only a bunch of gun-waving thugs that existed, but these were people who reshaped what we understand about our modern government, my brothers and sisters, and it began with two students outside of a college. I want you to know that if Huey Newton and Bobby Seale can do it, you can make a difference. My brothers and sisters, we have seen, even those of us who were not around to witness these events, have seen in our own lifetime events that have happened that have defied what we thought was possible in the United States. If you had asked me 15, 16 years ago, I would have told you that I did not believe it was possible to see a black president in my lifetime.
Amen.
In fact, on the day, my brothers and sisters, that Barack Obama first gave his nationally televised speech at the floor of the Democratic Party's National Convention, I believed it was possible one day that he might be president. But still imagine that day to be 20, 30, maybe 40 years down the line when he was a seasoned politician and had paid his dues in the United States Congress. I believed it might be possible one day that he might be president. And I remember when he first ran for office, I thought he was running too soon. I heard many intelligent people whose opinions that I held dearly said, he's wasting this golden opportunity because everybody knows it's Hillary Clinton's time. And he ought to wait. At the very least, he ought to be Hillary Clinton's vice president. And then maybe 8 years down the line, he can be president. But he's wasting the best opportunity that he has, that we have as a people, by jumping in this too soon. And I have to tell you, my brothers and sisters, it wasn't until he won the primary in Iowa that I ever thought he had a chance. But despite what history said, despite what even black people said, my brothers and sisters, he believed not only that he had a chance, but that it was the right time for him to run. And he spread the message of hope around the country with that 3-word slogan, "Yes, we can." And I want to let you know, my brothers and sisters, that if Barack Obama could change the course of the history of the United States, that yes, you can make a difference. Because, my brothers and sisters, these individuals that we are talking about, no matter how great history may remember them, they were not endowed with any special gifts that you yourselves lacked. They didn't have anything that you don't have, my brothers and sisters. They simply were willing to take their efforts and put them together with the resolve that said that they would not quit no matter the results, no matter the circumstances. They would not stop until history itself changed. And if they can do that, you can do that too, my brothers and sisters. This biblical passage gives us inspiration for how we can make a difference. The Bible says that these people who gathered, they did three things that I want to simply share before we take time to talk about this. The first thing it says is that they gathered together. They gathered together and listened to the apostles' teaching. In other words, my brothers and sisters, the first thing they did was they got their mind right.
All right.
We are surrounded daily by forces, explicitly and implicitly, that try to convince us of our powerlessness. And the only reason you try to convince someone they are powerless is if you are scared of the power that they have.
Amen. Amen.
My brothers and sisters, we are bombarded with messages that try to tell us that we are insufficient, that we are incapable, that the challenges around us are too great or too many, that the things that we can do can never change the history of the world, my brothers and sisters. But I want you to know that those messages are a lie. And the truth is not in them, my brothers and sisters, which is why it's important every opportunity we can that we gather together and come to the church house, my brothers and sisters, because we all need to get messages to counteract the negative messages that we receive.
Yes.
We need to hear the word from God, my brothers and sisters, that tell us that we are more than conquerors.
Yes.
We need to hear the message from God that tells us that we are above and not beneath,
Yes.
that we are the head and not the tail. We need to hear the word from God that says that greater is He that is in you than He that is in the world. We need to hear the message from God that tells us that no matter what the world, no matter what the enemy says about you, my brothers and sisters, that God loves you, that God has chosen you, and that God has great things in store for you. We need to come together so we can get our mind right.
Yes. Thank you, Lord. Thank you, Lord.
In the midst of the negativity, my brothers and sisters, we need to come to hear some productive positivity. In the midst of all the challenges, my brothers and sisters, we need to hear encouragement, my brothers and sisters, that we need to come together so that we can get our mind right. Because if our mind is not focused, if we do not believe, my brothers and sisters, if our mind is not energized with the possibilities, then our hands and our feet will not take the steps, will not do the work that is necessary. But we need to get our mind right.
Yes.
The second thing, my brothers and sisters, it says not only did they submit to the apostles' teaching, but it said that they gathered together in fellowship. One of the reasons, my brothers and sisters, that every Sunday we gather, we take time to share in fellowship with one another, that we take time to spend time in worship, actively hugging one another, checking on one another. The reason that we take time, my brothers and sisters, many Sundays to pray with and pray for one another is because that we don't just come to hear the word, but God moves even in the midst of fellowship. And fellowship is how we stay connected one to another, my brothers and sisters. And I want you to know that division is the tactic of the enemy. Because if we stay divided, then we cannot overcome, my brothers and sisters. But united, we are indefeatable. You all know I'm a basketball fan. I'm a basketball aficionado. And for the last several years, my favorite team has been the Golden State Warriors. And not just because they win championships, but because they play together. Because despite how many ever MVPs any particular player wins, despite how many accolades any particular player has, they are a team that constantly remind themselves that their greatest strength is their unity. And they learn how to play together. And so that's been challenged. That was challenged this year when two of the players, Draymond Green and Kevin Durant, got into a fight over who got the ball at the end of the game. And that fight rippled into the locker room and it threatened to tear the team apart. And everybody said this was going to be the end of the Warriors. The team was going to collapse in this. my brothers and sisters, not because any of the players became less talented in the fight, but because every coach, every player, every sportscaster knew this one simple rule is that no matter how talented any individual is, if the team cannot play together, the most talented teams will fall to the teams that play with greater unity, my brothers and sisters. And the same is true in our spiritual and political lives, my brothers and sisters, that it takes unity for us to be able to face the challenges that are against us. But when we come together, my brothers and sisters, when we stand together, like Gideon's troop that was already outnumbered 17-1. When God sent some of them home, and then they were outnumbered 30-1, and God sent even more of them home, and then they were outnumbered 300-1, my brothers and sisters. But God weeded out the people. God sent some of them home because God knew that if they were going to overcome the insurmountable numerical challenge that they had in front of them, that they had to be unified. And so God separated out all of the people who were not unified, let the others go home, because he knew that God could do more with a smaller number of people who were together on one accord than he could with big numbers. And so we have to stay connected, get our mind right, and stay connected. And then it said that they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching, to the fellowship, to the breaking of bread, and the prayers. That's the last thing I want to offer our brothers and sisters, is that at the end of the day, after we've gotten our mind right, after we've stayed connected, that we have to bathe our work in prayer. That it is the power of God that is the difference maker, my brothers and sisters. It is the power of God that helps us to overcome the insurmountable odds. It is the power of God that gives us the advantage that we need. No matter how awful the government is, my brothers and sisters, it is the power of God that helps us to overcome the odds and the obstacles. If you would ask David, how is it, David, that you, with no military training, were able to beat Goliath, who was twice your size, with much more fighting experience? How were you able to do it? I'm sure David would tell you, yes, I had practice out there taking care of my father's sheep. Yes, I killed a bear and I killed a lion. But David's testimony to Saul was the same God that delivered me from the bear and from the lion will deliver me from this uncircumcised Philistine. It was the power of God, David said, that delivered me. If you were to ask Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, how is it that you were able to survive the fiery furnace? You were sentenced to death by King Nebuchadnezzar, placed in the furnace so that you could burn alive. The very people who put you in the furnace were burned up while putting you in there. How were you able to survive? They would tell you it was because we said to King Nebuchadnezzar that the God we serve is able to deliver us out of your hands. And even if God doesn't deliver us out of your hands, we would rather die worshiping God than live bowing down to your idol. It was God who delivered us. The same God, my brothers and sisters, that delivered David from the hand of the giant Goliath, the same God that kept Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the lion's den, is the same God, my brothers and sisters, who was with 4 students in North Carolina as they sat at a lunch counter. Is the same God that was with Huey Newton and Bobby Seale as they stood up to oppression in Oakland. Was the same God who was with a skinny kid with a funny name, my brothers and sisters, who ran for president. Is the same God who is with us right now. If we can get our mind right, stay connected, and continue to go to God in prayer, I want you to know that you can make a difference. There is no circumstance, no challenge, no obstacle, my brothers and sisters, that we cannot overcome. You can make a difference. We have a practice here at Beloved Community Church that we call response to the word. It is our way of acknowledging that God does not just simply speak through me, but God desires to speak to and through each and every one of us. So we take a moment and we say, God, what is it that you are saying to us? And as we are hearing from God about what God is saying to us, we don't keep it to ourselves, but we take time to share with one another so that we can help build the connection we have to one another. We share with one another because you never know, the person you're talking to may not have heard what God was saying to them the way I said it, and they may need to hear what God is saying to you. And so we take time as a part of our worship to share with one another what God is saying to us. And so if you would, take a moment and say, God, what is it that you are saying to me right now? What is it that you have for me to say or to do differently right now? And as God is speaking that in your heart, I want you to turn and find a friend or a neighbor and share with them what God is sharing with you right now.